Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Leap to Success podcast. The Leap to Success podcast is the conduit by which we share women's stories of courage, bravery, and success. Each week, we interview women entrepreneurs and leaders that have taken the leap in their lives and inspire our global listeners to be more, have more, and show up more, and live a life filled with joy and happiness through believing in you. So today I am so excited to be able to spend some time talking to Denise Konkol. She is a member of the LEAP community and is a writer and loves telling story through writing. So Denise, tell our audience and our listeners a little bit about you and what makes you so awesome.
Well, I'm a writer, and I'm finding out that is something that not everybody enjoys doing. I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to find it to be a drudgery where it's my release. It literally is where I get lost. So
Nice.
I guess my short story would be that I started off going to school, weirdly enough, to be a nurse, but I wanted to do something more creative after about 2 years into college. And I was really drawn to advertising. So I thought, strangely enough, I'm like, let's go into copywriting. That doesn't involve long form.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I found myself learning, obviously too, it's just tell your client story. And I graduated from their J school at Marquette University, which is where that all came, but got to learn a lot of different styles of writing. And whatever I did, I found a way to work that into my job. So if it wasn't predominantly writing, I found a way to do it. And that never
Nice.
changed over the course of, 30 some years. So now I've gotten to a point where in March of last year, I was separated from my job. And it was funny because I had been blogging at this company as well. It wasn't not my predominant role,
Right.
but the word write just came in front of my face. And I'm like, okay, I got it. It's time to really turn toward, what I've always loved to do and really do it. And
Yeah.
I thought this was the sign to really like just let go. Like you said, take a leap. I don't know
Hmm.
if I took a leap. I certainly decided to do free fall, and I
Yeah.
decided to do 1099 and see what came up. And to me, that was very telling because as I kind of got quiet, I heard, people came forward. I think that's a really important thing to do is create that space where you can receive.
Yes.
And that's kind of what happened with me because I'm usually a person that likes to be in charge. I've had a lot of roles where I was like a project manager or coordinator of some sort, bringing all the, working pieces together. And this time I had to just be quiet and let it come to me. And that's kind
Yeah.
of what led me to get into grant writing. I was like a friend of a friend, and it's like, to me, it's like communities like this where you really do get to make those connections. And lo and behold, things work out. So, um,
Right.
yeah, I'm excited for this year. Last year was certainly boot camp. So this year is the
Yeah.
year. Just go for it.
I love it. I love it. Yes. So many things of what you said I want to dive a little bit deeper into, right? So I love that the message about getting quiet and listening and then finally listening to that calling that you mentioned it was there. Even when you were in college, you knew there was something that was pulling you to write. Even though you tried to go down different paths, it still pulled you some other direction, right? And you found a way through all of your career to have that be a portion of what you do, even if that wasn't your main job title, right? But you were always having that writing flair. So I love finding that thread of connection throughout everybody's career, where you show up in your natural gifts and talents. And I think that's so important, especially as entrepreneurs. Sometimes we can jump into something and we're like, okay, I think I can do this, or I've learned a skill, I can build a business around this. And we forget to go back and look at that thread that we've been doing that skill or we've been doing that thing for our whole lives. And it comes so naturally to us that we assume everybody can do it, right? So
Oh
I
yeah.
love that you said not everybody is a good writer or feels like they could be a good writer. And so that's why they need your help.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've stopped being surprised because a lot of people's like, oh, I hate writing. I'm like,
Hmm.
really? I'm like, oh wow, I'm like, but I met with by accident, there are no accidents, but I was supposed to meet with somebody on Tuesday and I we kind of got messed up. I didn't realize she was gonna be out of the country. And the place I went, she wasn't there, and I had asked about her, and she goes, "Oh no, she's not." And but the woman standing in front of me, I think over time you just learn it's like, well, this is the year of being bold. I'm like, so what's your name? And we sat
Yeah.
and talked for like 45 minutes, and she was a designer and a painter, and we got to share stories. And yeah, she's the same way. She goes, I'm more verbal. I'm not written, and
Mhm.
I'm kind of the opposite. So, as I mentioned to you before we began, like today's a little scary because this is verbal, and
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
not as good as at verbal as I am about writing it down. And in general, I think everybody feels that way, especially when it comes down to their story.
Right. Right. So what tips can you give to the audience members with the listening to this podcast about what are some key elements that if they are telling their story, right? So I work and you work with maybe primarily entrepreneurs, right? Or we're in the LEAP community with other women business owners. And so we need to tell our story through our website, through our social media, through, just how we're showing up or whether we're doing a presentation. And so what are the kind of the key elements that we might want to make sure we have included in our story?
I think initially, when people, kind of sit down with that blank page in front of them, it's a bit
Mhm.
overwhelming. And we're so trained, as we, get into our careers and things, the 30-second elevator speech. And really,
Yeah.
storytelling isn't about that at all. It's about you. What I tell people is, your business might make this kind of widget or do this kind of service, but that's not what makes you unique. It's your story, it's your why. So really think about, why did I start this? And it doesn't have to make sense. There's a great course I took called Just Shut Up and Write. And that's literally
Nice.
what it is. It's like take your brain out of it a little bit and just kind of jot, if it's not full sentences, just jot down those notes of things that really get you out of bed in the morning. What drives you to, do the business that you do? What do you enjoy about it? And that's kind of what shapes your story. And really it's what becomes authentic. I know there's a lot of talk about AI, which is artificial intelligence. I like to say writers and people who work with companies were authentic intelligence. So
Hmm.
you may use that as a tool, but when it comes down to coming across with your own voice, we all have one. And I think the other thing too, more metaphysically, it's like we don't think we have the right to boast or tell our story, and we totally do.
Hmm.
That's what I'm like. I bump into people all the time, and um, maybe that's the affliction of writing. It's like everybody's a story. So that's you kind of like start to interview them unconsciously. And if anything, if it's easier for you to sit down with somebody because you really can't get started writing, have them interview you, and
Yeah.
ask those questions about, hey, how did you get started in the business? And talk very little about the business itself. That'll come. But at the same time, people want to know you. Most people want to work with a person, not just a company brick and mortar. So
Right. Yeah,
you
I
might.
love that. I love that. And many people do just, especially when they have to talk about themselves or their own story. And we kind of have these, invisible rules like, oh, if I'm in business, I can only be professional and only talk about my business and I can't talk about my personal life and can't blur those lines. But I think especially on COVID, during when everybody was on Zoom and we got to see people's homes and we got to see their cats walking across the screen and their kids in the
That's
background. And
right.
it really made us more human and realized that we are doing business with other humans who have dynamic lives going on in the background too. And so I think it's given us a little bit more permission to be more human when we do write about ourselves or do have to share our story. But there's always that block with people. It's like I can't brag about myself, right? Or I
Right.
don't. Yeah. So how do you help people get through that?
Well, and honestly, I suffer with it too. I feel that it's kind of funny in talking with, some practitioners that I've worked with. The word unworthy comes up a lot. The word
Mhm.
fear comes up a lot. And I think that's particularly true for women. Um,
Mhm.
if I could understand it for myself, I explain why it happens to other people. But um, again, have somebody sit down and say, ask them, what do I do well? What do you find that, I excel in? Because
Mhm.
if you pick especially like 3 or 4 people, you're going to find a lot of the same things being said. And that's really what you need to understand. It's like, this is what they see. Um, Own it. It's
Yes.
okay. Run with it. And like I said, the lady I met with on Tuesday by accident, she used the term sphere of brilliance. We all have
Mhm.
a sphere of brilliance. What you do too, what is that, that you could do easily, and that's the question you ask, like, oh, what could I do all day long? When I stumbled into grant writing, I realized how much I did love storytelling and how much of all the things that I had done in the past led up to it because it involved a lot of journalism. It's research, it's interviewing, it's really building relationships to get people to tell you their story, building that trust. So I think we just need to tap into when we are feeling comfortable and we don't think about a thing when we're doing it,
Mhm.
that's our sphere of brilliance. And, and if it takes somebody else telling us that, great. Ask those, for that feedback. I think that's so important.
Yes. I do too. I do too. I teach a class called Pinnacle Gift, and it's a full day of us focusing on what is our brilliance, what are our natural gifts and talents, what is that thread of things we've been able to do our whole lives, and we just assume everybody else can do it and it's not special, but it is special because it's unique to us, right? So I love that tapping into that and being able to find that in other people is such a gift. And so, something you said earlier about the grant writing. So, how does storytelling help you be a better grant writer?
It begins because you're working with people with funds and you're working on behalf of your nonprofit. This is maybe a board of people. And what to me helps is that if you come across with a story that resonates with them, obviously a lot of, most grant applications also ask for a budget. They ask for your paperwork. But to me, it's the story that really makes it three-dimensional. It
Yeah,
kind of leaps off the page and says, wow, I feel that. It A good story emotes or evokes emotion. And as much as they want to talk about, the black and white of things, they also look at, what they're doing, what their funds can mean. And that's where the storytelling is so important, is to really illustrate, paint that picture through words of, what the issue is, how it's being solved currently, and how it could continue or be improved, kind of casting that vision. And that's what storytelling does in that regard for grant writing. And it's been such a blessing to be able to do this because it hones
nice.
your craft, but it also makes you aware of how other people might be thinking, because there's always two sides that you're working with, the people that have the funds and the people that need them. So you're
Yeah,
speaking to both and speaking to one and speaking on behalf of another. So you, it's finding that voice to really reach those people.
nice. I love that. I love that, Denise. So, really being able to tell that story because, sometimes we hear the word grant or grant writing and we think it's all data, right? Fill in the blanks and
Right.
put this spreadsheet together and all this stuff. But really, what people want to do is tell the story of their nonprofit, tell the passion, tell the impact they're having. And yes, you can do that sometimes with the numbers, but you really need to have the story behind the story so that it does, like you said, leap off the page when people are reading it, when the people receiving or reviewing the grants.
And maybe it's my journalism background, but what I really want to do is the one I work predominantly with is based in Mexico. And I've told them on a couple of our calls, I'm like, I'm going. I'm like, I want to spend like a weekend or, like a volunteer week helping.
Nice.
I'm like, that's really going to help me immerse. and
Right.
speak with your voice. I mean, even before I, write anything for a client, I want to talk with them because I call it channeling. I'm like, I hear
Hmm.
what they're saying, how they speak, where their eyes light up. And to me, that all becomes woven into the words.
Nice. That's another differentiator between you and AI, right? So AI can do a lot of things and it can come up with a lot of content, but it can't hear the inflection of your voice or the light in your eyes or your energy that you're beaming out when you talk about a certain subject or a client that you worked with or something like that, right? That's where another human being really can pick up on those nuances and help you focus on those things, right? Or they'll notice, oh, your energy totally drains when you talk about that. So let's not build that into your story, right? So,
Right.
um, so how do you help? How do you work with your clients? Like, what's the process that you go through with them?
I feel like for many of them, again, maybe they're a little hesitant or they're not sure where to start. And again,
Hmm.
I think I put my journalism hat on and I just interview them, let them,
Nice.
maybe we'll talk about their business, but initially it starts with, oh, what do you like to do? And, you kind of talk about that. And I feel like that opens it up so that when you do want to ask those other questions about their business, they're comfortable. And I think that first part is just building rapport and trust, to let them know that, they're giving you such a gift. Their story,
Hmm.
everybody's story is a gift. And that is probably the scariest part for me as a writer is from when I take that and then I put it on a page and I send it to them and say, how did I do? Did
Yeah.
did I nail it? And a lot of times, they're like, oh, this is so great. When my very first grant proposal that I did, we were kind of in a safe space where I wrote it, but it didn't go to the client first. And my grant writer, she goes, this is perfect. And I was just over the moon. I'm like, oh my God, we hit.
Yeah.
But I think that's the responsibility that we hold to realize, how precious somebody's story is because it is literally like a snowflake. There's no two of
Yes.
and so that's what I take into the process is like this is a privilege and how I can tell it it's very important and you're very accountable and responsible for it.
Nice. I love that. I love that. And your passion, just as we talked about energy, your passion just came through so profoundly, when you're talking about that and what a privilege it is to take somebody's story and help shape it and mold it and then give it back to them and say, did I capture you, right? And sometimes I'm sure that's very emotional for people if they've never had themselves reflected back to themselves in the written word, right? So can you share a client story about, I know you just shared one about the grant, but are there other client stories that you want to share with us just about the reaction that people have when you're able to tell their story?
So I spent 3 years really being a journalist. I was the company I'm pretty sure they still exist and they run a site, but it's called Patch. They're owned by AOL. And their idea was to go into communities that were underserved through their media because there might have been a big city that, they broadcast their news, but, occasionally maybe your city got a story out there because it was usually tragic or whatever.
Right.
We were put into cities to say, this is their news site. We're going to cover their news. And I had the amazing privilege of writing on behalf of my own city, the city I lived in. I was
Nice.
one of a few people that actually lived in the city they wrote for. And they had been used to getting a newspaper that only published once a week, got the story wrong, or, didn't, was just in a rush to get to print. And again, was usually, as far as journalism goes, the news was late by the time
Hmm.
people got to read it. So this was online, it was real time. And after 3 years, even though we were seeing growth, our revenues were coming up, the expenses were coming down, they decided to shutter um, the sites as far as having a local editor there. So
Mm.
I was terrified to break the news to my city. It's like, I'm not going to be here because all these years they have been, they're building that trust, say, hey, you have your own news again.
Right.
Now I'm gone. And I'm like, Oh, so I got a call from the chief of police. He says, he goes, I have never trusted media. He goes, but I trusted you.
Oh, nice.
That made me feel wonderful. It also broke my heart. I'm like, so hopefully, they have found another way to get the news out there through a trusted source. And to me, that was like gold star.
Yes,
I
yes.
never forgot that. And like, and we talk, and every once in a while he would call before I was let go. He would just literally call and talk with me to tell me, hey,
Yeah.
this is coming up. I want to let you know. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I was the only journalist he told that to. So
Wow.
I felt so blessed by that. It's like, it was, like I said, it's a privilege, to get that.
Hmm. Yeah. And that comes through so powerfully is that level of trust that somebody has to have with you, but you exude that, right? Like you're a calm and trusting presence. So anybody out there listening, if you need to tell your story, or you're a nonprofit who needs to tell your story through a grant application, right? Or you're a business owner who just needs some help talking about yourself, whether that's on your website or your social media, or you might want to go out and start telling your story to other people, right? And sharing that.
Mhm.
Please, please, please reach out to Denise, and we're going to have all of your contact information in the show notes. So wherever anybody is listening to the podcast, whether it's on YouTube or any of the podcast streaming services, we'll have your information in the show notes. Is there a particular type of work that you're looking for in 2025, or types of clients that you'd like to, ask for on the podcast?
I think in some ways I would like to do more work with, I feel like I pair well, to use a wine analogy, I pair well with people who are in the web space,
Okay.
developers, designers, because those professionals don't want to write. They don't want to do content. They want to work
Right.
with people that do content. And I'm the same way where I'm like, I do web content, but I won't design your website. So to me, it's a nice pairing to have to give to a client together. So if anybody's out there that's in those spaces, like, yeah, people always want me to write stuff and I have no idea what to do because I'm coding their website. I'm like, I'm working on their JavaScript, whatever. It's two different disciplines. So I enjoy
Right.
working with people like that. And then on a much smaller basis, I know I've had a couple of people ask me, it's like, do you do resumes? Do you do like LinkedIn profiles? And then the answer is yes, because that's also story, you know.
Yes.
And if you need to stand out, that's one of the, social media in that regard for on LinkedIn is really, you really want to stand out and be separate.
Yes. And your resume and cover letters really need to have a good story, your cover letter especially,
Mhm.
because your
Yeah,
resumes are being read by bots now, right, to get you through a certain
yeah.
algorithm. So that cover letter can really help you stand apart from everybody else that's applying for those jobs. So that would be a great thing to reach out to Denise
Mhm.
for. And I love, that you asked for web designers, those kind of people, because typically I know in working with web designers in the past, they do have that issue where their clients kind of get stuck with the content. Like, we can build a great website, but we need the content to go on the site. And it's one of the most frequent places where people start to drag their feet, and then the deadlines start to get missed because nobody's giving the content, right. Because people just, again, don't know how to talk about their products or their services or their own story in a way that's compelling, or we just get stuck and we think it's no good. So having
And
you as a person could really be helpful there.
yeah, and a website is never one and done. You
Right.
have to refresh it to make Google happy. To
Yes.
make show that that there's new content out there. And truthfully, a blog is a great way to build those SEO scores. I know it's changed over time, but in general, you want to create that traffic.
Yes.
Way to do it.
Yes. I love it. I love it. So, if congratulations again on taking the leap last year and jumping into being your own boss and following that passion. If you were going to give some advice to somebody who is on the precipice of taking a big leap, whether in their career or personal life, what kind of advice would you have for that person?
Uh, I think the advice I would give, because I had to give it to myself, is just to be bold. that's this year's mantra. It's like, be bold, in receiving and in asking. And it's amazing. Don't overthink anything. Just, if, especially, I'm like, I feel like a lot of people feel that coming up and then they put it down. Even if it's
Mhm.
something as simple as, you're at the supermarket and somebody has a great blouse on, say it. You know,
Yes.
that's, and I think our earlier meeting that we had, it's like, that's your subconscious going, do that. And
Yes.
I think that's what we need to pay more attention to, because it's amazing the relationships we end up with, and the support we get from it. And I think it
Mhm.
makes us feel good too. So just ask, be bold.
Nice. I love that. I love that. Both of those things. Be bold and just ask, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes as women and as entrepreneurs, we think we have to figure everything out ourselves and we don't want to ask for help because we don't want to bother anybody, or we feel like I should be able to learn everything on my own, right? Because there's so many resources available. But we do need other people and we do need to ask for help sometimes. And so if you are out there listening and you need some help with writing, you need an update on your website, or you need fresh content for your LinkedIn profile, or you have something that you need to have written, please, please, please reach out to Denise. And you've already heard her and heard her passion for telling your story. So please reach out and let her help you. Okay. Anything else that you have to share with our listeners today, Denise?
Not really, no great revelations. It's been an
Okay.
amazing year. I hope I'm if I can do it, so can you, type of thing. I know a lot of people hear that often, but I would have to say jump in the net will appear. It's amazing
Yes.
what we can all do. And as you mentioned, bold has one connotation to it, but in being bold, you're also vulnerable, which is equally as alluring to people.
Yes.
Nothing more authentic. So
Yes. Yes. I love it. I love it. So, okay. Well, thank you again for being part of the Leap for Ladies community. It's such a special group of amazing women entrepreneurs, just like Denise. So, if you're interested in joining the Leap for Ladies community, you can find that in the show notes as well. And again, reach out to Denise and just have a conversation with her about how she can help you with any of your projects that you need to infuse more of your personal story into.
yep.
Yeah, great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today, Denise. And again, reach out to Denise with any of your writing concerns or projects. And if you're a grant writer, if you're a nonprofit that needs a great grant writer to help tell your story, please reach out to Denise. And if you're an entrepreneur that just needs some help, please reach out to her as well. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. And for those of you listening, please make sure you subscribe to your favorite podcast channel or our YouTube channel, so that you don't miss any of these future podcasts coming up. Thanks so much.
Thank you.